5 tips to improve your dry dropper game. Alright, let's get into it. Welcome back to Happy on the Fly. My name is Carson, and if you don't know me, I'm an avid fly fisherman. I've been fly fishing for the past 10 plus years and competitive fly fishing for the past 8 years. And today I'm going to be showing you one of the most important tips that I've learned along the way of my fly fishing journey using the dry dropper system. So let's start off with tip number 1, using a longer leader. So when I started off using a dry dropper system, I was using it with my Euro nymphing rig. So if you don't know what Euro nymphing is, I have a whole video on how to Euro nymph, or what is Euro nymphing, and I have that link up in the corner of this video. But overall, Euro nymphing is a very simple tactic to have contact with your fly with a shorter leader. Now that was the exact problem. I was using a shorter leader. Now today, I'm going to be using a leader that is tapered between 9 feet to 12 feet long. But also too, from that leader, I have tippet that extends from that leader. Depending on the depth of the water, it can vary, but I use between 5x to 7x tippet and 8x for extreme measures. But most of all, the conditions will tell you what tippet to use. Now with this extended leader, now you have more leader mass. But with that brings us to our next tip, is to set the hook gently. Now when I started off using these lighter tippets, and I'm using this larger mass of a leader, when I set the hook, when I was starting off, I was setting the hook very aggressively. So what I had to learn is that setting the hook with that leader is way different than using or setting the hook when you're Euro nymphing. So when I'm Euro nymphing, I'm casting out, and then suddenly when I feel a strike, I quickly flick the wrist back. The problem using that tactic when you're using these extended taper leaders is that you are going to be putting a lot of mass and tension on that tippet, which most likely will break. So when setting the hook, when using these long extended leaders, what I like to do is to pretend that I'm going to be making another cast. I'm making a smooth upward motion with my forearm and my wrist, pretending that I'm going to be making another cast. And with all that mass, with the fly line, the extended taper leader, and your tippet, that'll be the perfect hook set when you're using these type of leaders, when you're using a dry dropper system. But also another problem when you're using that abrupt nymphing hook set with this leader is that you're going to make a pop sound with your Dryfly and your nymph on top of the water. So if you're in slow moving water and you suddenly make an abrupt cast, that leader, your Dryfly and your nymph is going to make a pop sound on top of the water and make unwanted attention, which most likely will scare off this fish. So be sure to use a smooth and methodical cast when you're using this leader, and I guarantee you this will help catching more fish while also hooking into those fish better. Alright, tip number 3, using a more visible Dryfly. So when I started using a dry dropper system, I thought I might want to use a natural Dryfly color to catch more fish. But that actually ended up hurting me even more going more natural, because I wasn't able to visibly see when those fish were striking. So if you have a tiny little hot spot on top of your, for example, parachute atoms, that will actually guide you and help you see those strikes better. Even though that color is not natural, the trout only see what's under the water. Basically, the belly of the fly is what the trout are seeing, not what's on top. So if you have a high vis orange color up top and you have a natural gray or green color on the bottom, when you're matching the hatch, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you see those strikes better. Any hesitation or any twitch or movement with that Dryfly, I always set the hook. But also too, it helps out when you're using a visible Dryfly in conditions where the water is a little bit more choppy. Either if you're fishing a run or riffles, it'll help you fish those better. Alright, let's get to tip number 4. Reduce tag length of your Dryfly. Your Dryfly is the most important part when you're using a dry dropper system, in my opinion. Due to it'll help the buoyancy of your nymph at the bottom or the dropper tag, but also visibility when those trout hit. So besides visibility, we need the tension and the contact with that nymph as much as possible. So for example, if you have a certain length of line, your nymph is at the dropper tag, but also up here where the tag is extended with your dry fly. So when using a longer tag, it'll reduce seeing the visibility of those strikes quick enough to have a hook set on them, but also too, it'll cause wrap-ups and tangles with your line. Basically now, if you have a shorter tag, you'll have more contact with the fly, you will see strikes quicker, but also you will have less tangles. This one took me a while to learn, but over time, when I started using those really short tag systems, I have really upped my game when I'm using a dry dropper system. So for our last tip, tip number 5 is to control your line. This took me a while to learn, but it is so essential, even if when you're using a dry fly, a single dry fly, or using a dry dropper system. When retrieving in your line properly, it'll help you with contact with your fly, but also have better strikes on this fish. So basically what I like to use is to have my hand on the handle of the fly rod, pinching the fly line with my other hand, but also using my other 3 fingers to slowly retrieve in the line, just like so. If you go to some of my videos where I'm on the water, which I'll have some videos up here in the corner, basically you'll see me retrieving that line either with a nymphing, dry dropper, anything. I'm controlling my line using a pinch and curl method. And if you guys want me to do an entire video on retrieving your line, please leave it down in the comments below. Well, thank you everybody for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments, please leave it down in the comments below. And if you really enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to getting more content like this, and be sure to smash that like button. Until then, I'll see you next time, and as always, stay fishy.